Ridiculous this Stump the Trunk stuff has become. Stump the Trunk was not my idea. It is still not my idea. I do not believe for a minute that I know everything. There's a ton of stuff I don't know. The little bit I do know is only about music. I mean, I can't tell you anything about anything else, but I do know something about music, but I don't think I know it all by any stretch. But, of course, that doesn't play so well on TV. You have to sell it. So, the idea for Stump the Trunk came about, actually, by, again, going back to comedians that would often come on my radio show. A friend of mine, a comic by the name of Jim Brewer. Jim is actually the guy responsible for the bane of my existence, Stump the Trunk. Because what's happened is, Jim used to do a radio show, and he lives in Jersey, not far from me, and he used to do a radio show, and he used to always have me come in and sit in on it with him. And he was amazed, because Jim likes rock and metal, but not like a psycho fan. And he would be amazed at the stupid facts that I would pull out of my head when we'd be talking. And he said to me, hey man, let's take some calls from people and see if let them ask you questions and see if you can give them the answer. Let's call it Stump the Trunk. Okay, Jim, so he did it on his radio show. And sure enough, people called and totally got into it. So that when we started doing that metal show, it moved on to the TV side. Where it's so bizarre because I never know where it's going to come from, where people are going to try to fire questions at me. I mean, it's surreal. If I go into a rock environment or a rock show, I know most people there are going to know me. But you go to the deli counter, and you're like, yeah, I'll take a half a pound of the Swiss and 3/4 of the ham, and the guy is slicing it. Hey, so who was the third guitar player in Iron Maiden? Like, what? Like, it's completely out of left field. Happens all the time. It's Yannick Gary, sir. The most surreal Stump the Trunk moment for me ever. And I told this story on that metal show.
It's like driving 30%.
Was every 3 years, I have to go get a procedure known as a colonoscopy. Now the reason why I need to do this is because, and this is a serious moment, and it's important for some of us meddlers that are getting a little older. Because my dad had colon cancer. My dad, thankfully, was diagnosed early and is healthy and alive and great today and beat it because, thank you. Thank you. But he is because he was diagnosed early. Now, because of there being a family history now, I just have to go for routine screenings because it's now in my family. Quick side note, the late great Ronnie James Dio, who was one of my dearest friends, and I have so many stories and memories that I couldn't even begin to tell you. His doctors have told me many times on my platforms, whenever I have the opportunity, to talk about how important this is. Because if Ronnie was a guy that would never go to doctors, would never get checked. If he felt something wrong, it'll just pass. If he wasn't like that, he would still be with us today. Because what he had was curable if it was detected early, and he unfortunately let it go. So, as a result, I go for these screenings every 3 years for family history. For those of you that don't know what a colonoscopy is, well, it is a joy to behold. It's actually not all that bad. The prep part is the worst. The actual procedure, you're knocked out during. But anyway, what you do is you get on a gurney. It's an in and out procedure, literally. Get nothing on but this little smock. The day before, you drink a ton of stuff that makes you shit water for 24 hours. Clean yourself out, and you go in. You're all dehydrated. You're all no food for at least a day. And you're on there on this little gurney with nothing but a little sheet in front of you. And you're standing there, and you get wheeled in under this big light. And they put an IV where they get ready to knock you out. And once they do knock you out, they proceed to stick about 8 feet of hose up your ass. With a camera on the end. And to make sure everything's cool. And again, honestly, because it is important as we get older, you get screened, you don't feel anything, you're knocked out. But I'm in there, like my third one, and I'm on the gurney, just with the sheet laying down. And you're a little apprehensive, and you got the IV going. Get wheeled under the big light. The nurse is walking around, getting everything ready. The instrument comes out. And the doctor walks in with his white coat on. And he comes up to the end of the table I'm on, he pulls the clipboard up, and he looks at it, and he looks at me, and he goes, "Okay, Mr. Trunk." Now this is a time where I wish I did have a fake name. And he says, "Colonoscopy procedure, okay, family history, okay." Pulls out the instrument thing, starts to pull up the sheet.
That's the cocktail.
Starts to turn up the propofol, which is what they put you to sleep with, otherwise known as Jackson juice. No joke. That's the stuff Michael Jackson was getting hopped up on to go to sleep. So, the anesthesiologists now call it Jackson juice. So, they, just as he's getting ready, he goes, "So, before we get underway, I've got this question for you." And he pulls a white envelope out of his jacket. And I'm like, I can't believe this is happening. And I'm looking at him with this look of disbelief, and he's like, "This is you, you're that guy, right?" "Yeah, but Doc, is this really the time? Plus the prize girl's not here, I can't give you anything if I get it wrong." And this guy was like, "Well, this really came from my assistant in my office, and he really needed to know if you knew this." I was like, "Do you think you could maybe give it to me after we leave? And then I'll call him or something?" And he did. He gave it to me after. And I actually, if you saw the episode, I told this story. I actually read this whole question on the on TV and told this story. And the name of the question, I'll never forget it, was, what was the name of the first book that Bruce Dickinson wrote? Does anybody know? I'm stumping your asses now. Nobody knows. It's like Lord Iffy Boat Race. Clearly a big hit here in America. So Stump the Trunk has become this crazy thing that I never saw evolving into what it has. It's fun, but it's a bit, I don't think I know it all by any stretch. And then the last thing I did was in 2011.